Good evening. Good evening. I'm Brian Dories. I'm the Artistic Director of Theater of War Productions. We're so glad you could be here. We know we have some groups that are going to be trickling in and filling up the rest of our seats. And those joining us on Zoom, thank you for your patience as our New York City audience arrives here at the Green Space at WNYC. I'm going to go back behind my table in a second and kick off the radio program with some tracking that we're going to do to play on the radio on as early as Saturday. We're hoping to get this on the air. So this is the 6th of our episodes or installments of this long-form journalism radio series that you're now a part of. Some of you, I see some familiar faces. To those who've been here before, welcome back. For those who are new, the basic idea behind what we do is really simple. 3 actors who I'll introduce in just a second are going to come up and they're going to read a brand new article. It hasn't even been published yet. It will land in the New Yorker on Sunday. And we're premiering it here at WNYC by Jelani Cobb, a contributing writer to The New Yorker, also the dean of the School of Journalism at Columbia University. And it's about his father and fatherhood and being a parent and the sins of the father and trying to be your own person and all kinds of things that we're going to talk about in our discussion. The actors are going to read the article. It'll take about 25 minutes from beginning to end. And as soon as it's done, I'm going to come out and ask you some questions. And I'll ask the folks who are on Zoom some questions. And if you're on Zoom, all you have to do is raise your hand, say, I want to talk, and we'll bring some of you into the mix and into dialogue with folks here in New York City. The whole idea is we want it to be a national conversation or even a global conversation that's sort of grounded here in New York City. So thanks for being with us. Thanks for your participation and your open listening to this article, and we're really, really excited to share it with you. It's the kind of moving, vulnerable, present, touching piece that's like the perfect catalyst for the kind of exchange we want to have with you tonight, just a few days away from Father's Day. So without further ado, I'm going to go back to my little station. Someone on the way in said it looked like a dunking booth. And gonna launch right into this thing. I'm Brian Dories. Actually, before I even get started, in a few seconds, I'm gonna invite the actors to come out, and we're gonna have to pretend like it's Citi Field. So maybe just for a brief second, could you just to level set as an audience, could you give me like what you think would be appropriate when the actors come out, and I'll tell you if it's loud enough. So. Give it up for our actors. Okay. Okay. That's good. That's like 3. Okay. No. Yeah, you can do the wave. Yeah, do the wave. Whatever you feel like. The more interactive this whole thing feels, the better it is on the radio. So even in the discussion, if someone says something in the room and you don't know their name, that's fine. Say, the gentleman over there, or that woman over there, they said something that really touched me. If you could acknowledge each other, that also for people who are listening in their cars, gives them a sense that they're in the room with us. So I'm modeling it with you right now. I'm sure you'll do it better than I am a little bit later. I'm going to read from a script, but then we're going to get to the most important part, which is the unscripted part of our event. So I'm Brian Dories, Artistic Director of Theater of War Productions, and it is so great to be with all of you here tonight. At Theater of War Productions, we perform powerful texts for audiences with something at stake, and then we pass the mic to anyone who comes to listen, like all of you, to start a conversation and open dialogue about topics that sometimes divide us, to foster connections and explore what unites us despite our differences. I've been making theater for all my life, and what I'm most interested in is the role that actors can play in our lives, how a great performance can be an act of service that helps you see yourself and the people around you in a totally new way. Today, we're coming to you from WNYC in New York, and we have on many others joining us from all over the country and the world on Zoom. Together, we're going to listen to an essay written by Jelani Cobb, published in The New Yorker, called The Old Man. It's a story about fatherhood and what it means to be an older dad, and it's also a story about the traits and behaviors that we often inherit from our parents and how many of us strive to do things differently. For Jelani, many of his memories of his own father are about his dad navigating getting older. The actors who will be reading Jelani's piece are Frankie Faison from The Wire, Chad Coleman from The Walking Dead, and Michael Braugher from The Gilded Age, Please welcome them to the stage.
"49 years ago, on what I recall as a Saturday morning when I was 6 and my father was 56, I barged into the bathroom, as was my habit, and witnessed a scene that both bewildered and fascinated me. Our 1970s era yellow-orange sink was covered in thick black streaks, as were parts of the countertop. My father, a formidable man who had been a heavyweight boxer in his youth and retained his imposing physique well into his 60s, hulked over the faucet. He turned to me, and I saw that his mustache and upper lip were stained the same color as the countertop, as was a portion of his normally salt and pepper hair. To his right was what appeared to be a cup of ink, and he periodically dipped a comb into it and gingerly pulled it through his hair. I was already at that stage an expert eavesdropper, and an enigmatic sliver of conversation that I had overheard a few days earlier began to make sense. My mother, whose preoccupations included Telly Savalas, an icon of the 70s television, who'd shown that baldness and therefore middle age could be a selling point in the right man, had said to my father,
"You should keep your gray. It looks good on you."
Having never seen my father's hair any other color but gray, it had not occurred to me that there was an option. The scene playing out in the bathroom was clarifying. The ritual complete, my father assessed himself in the mirror. The still wet strands glistened as if he just stepped out of an ad for Afro Sheen. The dyes of that era were not like the subtle modern versions. They were blunt instruments wielded against the most obvious sign of aging. The concoction in the cup had made my father's hair unnaturally, propagandistically black. His camouflage stood out. He did not look like a man with dark hair. He looked like a man with gray hair who had dyed it black. I decided that I agreed with my mother.
"I like the gray better."
I told him.
Yeah?
He said,
I'm gonna wait until you get some.
then he chuckled knowingly.
I replayed that conversation years later when I was 29 and a single recalcitrant gray hair showed up in my beard. I replayed it again in my early 30s when a colony of them formed a streak on my chin, and again in my 40s when a friend described me as having a salt and pepper beard.
I thought about the dye incident most recently a few weeks ago when August, the elder of my twin sons by 9 minutes, bounded in my lap and insouciantly asked why my beard was so gray. He is 5. I am 55. My hair is gray because I'm trying to win an argument with your long-deceased grandfather, I thought. His twin brother Hollis, who is earnest to a fault, is consumed with a simpler question.
Daddy, are you stronger than a bear? Can you pick up a whole car? What about a house?
He awaits the answers if trying to understand what station in the Marvel universe I should occupy. Before I could start talking to August about hair follicles that gradually lose their ability to produce melanin, he answered his own question.
I know why. It's because of age.
Yeah, I thought, just wait until you get some. And laughed at my own cleverness. A therapist friend once told me that people frequently strive to become their parents or their unparents, using them as role models to be emulated or as a negative roadmap of what is to be avoided, or sometimes both simultaneously. I contrasted my father's approach to aging by allowing time to mark its passage as it sees fit. But I echoed him in a much more profound way, by having young children at a point when that passage had already become apparent.
Yeah, material age has been a subject of fixation since the biblical Sarah gave birth to Isaac, purportedly at age 90. But the age of fathers has generally been a lesser concern. Sarah's husband Abraham, according to the Bible, was 100 years old at the time of Isaac's birth. The age of American women at the birth of their first child has ticked steadily upward for decades, driven in part by the increasing number of women entering the workforce and seeking professional degrees, as well as by a broader access to contraception and advancements in fertility treatments. Now, the trend is a rough barometer of women's progress and the evolving vestige of possibilities in their lives. Almost surreptitiously, though, the age of American fathers has crept up too, often in concert with the same dynamics that have changed women's reproductive timetables.
In 2019, the year my twins were born, the share of American babies with fathers who were 50 or older was almost triple what it was on the morning when my parents, Willie Lee and Mary Cobb, brought me home from Mary Immaculate Hospital 50 years earlier. My father and I did not follow the exact same pattern. He had 2 sons across 2 generations and 2 separate marriages. I married young and helped raise a stepdaughter, but did not have biological children until I was 47, engaged to my wife Danielle, who was a woman 15 years my junior, and our daughter Lennox, now 8, was born. I have considered this phenomenon from both sides of the ledger, as the child of an older father and the older father of children. The growing preponderance of gray dads mark both the prerogatives of maleness and a greater share of gender equality.
My father grew up in a speck of a town called Hazelhurst, Georgia, which is about 2 hours west of Savannah. It doesn't seem to have changed much from the place he used to talk about. A few years ago, a resident described it as on a website as a small, peaceful place that, unfortunately, has very few things to do for entertainment. Now, the 1920 census lists Willie Lee's family as mulatto, but the 1930 census describes them as Negro. Now, a bit of a mordant familia humor held that the Great Depression had hit the year before, and the family had been demoted. Now, my father, the eldest boy of their 4 children, quit school at 8 or 9 to help earn money in his father's absence. Now, in his late teens, he moved to Miami, where his father had relocated and took up boxing, but he quit when he was pressured to throw a fight. Now, after a stint in the Army, Willie Lee migrated to New York City, where he worked as an electrician. Not long after his arrival, he ditched his given name, which was considered a hick handle, and he renamed himself Al. People sometimes called him Big Al, which he thought sounded sharp and urbane. Now, after a few years, he married a woman named Carol, whom he had known growing up in Georgia. They settled in Harlem and had a son who was born on my father's 27th birthday and named him Alan. They split up after Alan turned 10, and in a decision that seemed uncommon at the time, my father became the primary custodial parent. The explanations for this arrangement varied over the years, but it was generally accepted that Alan, a virtual replica of our father, was happier living with him. My parents met years later in the early 60s when my father was summoned to fix an issue with the wiring in a building on St. Nicholas Avenue where my mother lived. Now, she was a newly divorced single mother of two in her early 20s, and he was a not-so-newly divorced single father in his mid-40s. According to the familiar lore, he completed the work and left only to knock on her door 5 minutes later to ask for a light. She handed him a book of matches and closed the door, but he knocked again 30 seconds later, coyly explaining that the matches were wet, but also making no effort to hide his interest. He then confessed that he'd asked for the matches in an attempt to strike up a conversation with her. Smooth, yeah, he later said on this opening play. They exchanged numbers and began dating. My mother later told me that she liked my father's good looks and his sense of style, but was truly impressed by the fact that he was raising a son virtually on his own. They married and bought a house on a quiet street in Hollis, Queens, about 2 years later. The blended families included Alan, who was drafted to fight in Vietnam not long shortly after I was born, and my mother's children, Valerie and Victor, who were respectively 10 and 7 years older than me. I came along as a quiet testament to my parents' hopes in second chances, or in my father's case, as we later learned, maybe even third ones. My parents were the products of particular histories. His decision to leave Hazelhurst, Georgia, and hers to leave her hometown of Bessemer, Alabama, their previous failed relationships, the ambitions that had already been foreclosed, and those that remained in play. But to the world, they presented as something as common, even anticipated, a middle-aged man and his much younger second wife.
I was, in fact, a surprise. My mother had endured a difficult pregnancy with Victor, and her doctor had suggested she would not be able to carry another pregnancy to term. An overheard comment in which my mother joked to a friend that my birthday fell almost exactly 40 weeks after my father's told me more than I ever needed to know about the circumstances of my conception. Older dads are frequently also the fathers of multi-generational children of children who belong to different generations. Somewhere in elementary school, I noticed that my friends' fathers were roughly the same age as Alan. When I tagged along on my father's trips to the electrical supply house, he would quickly introduce me as his youngest child, which had the effect of preempting questions about whether he'd taken his grandson out for the day.
Early on, there were less than subtle signs that my father was parenting with an eye on the clock. On a random afternoon when I was 10 and my father was 60, to my great and incredulous horror, he sat me down and delivered a protracted lecture on the human menstrual cycle. The talk elided any reference to the mechanics of reproduction. This was not the talk, but was an otherwise wide-ranging explication of the subject matter, drawing on the book of Genesis, personal observations, and popular mythology.
The bleeding happens once every month,
he told me.
And if it doesn't happen, it means the woman is going to have a baby.
He concluded with a cryptic reference to this information being vitally important to me in the future. In retrospect, he'd given a completely serviceable explanation that covered the basic biology and time frames, but at the time, I believed none of it. I respected, adored my father, but was also just old enough to suspect he did not always have his facts straight. The concept of humans possessing an internal calendar that was somehow capable of determining when roughly a month had gone by was too absurd a premise to be believed, particularly from the person who had helped convince me for half my young life to believe in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. Next, you'll try to tell me my left hand knows when it's 3 p.m., I thought. Even if his information were true, I could not imagine a world in which it would possibly be relevant to me. Now, not long before this, we had a tiff. He had cooked Sunday dinner, as was his habit, and upon learning that I'd finished off the roast beef before he'd had any, grew incensed, told me I'd eaten too much, and accused me of being gullible. Well, that word had appeared on one of my 5th grade vocabulary lists, and I saw an opportunity to win the exchange. At that early juncture, I had already spent 2 more years in school than my father ever would. Daddy? Gullible doesn't have anything to do with food. It means you believe anything people tell you. My father summoned all the indignation he could manage and shot back.
And in my house, it means to eat too much.
He was right about that. If, by some unforeseen combination of luck, hustle, and the intercession of the relevant saints, you managed to purchase a home, clothe and feed 4 children, despite 3 grades worth of education from a Jim Crow schoolhouse in Georgia, it was entirely within your purview to decide the denotations of language on said property. As with his seemingly far-fetched explanation on female biology, this fact was also lost to me at the time. But in time, I came to respect its importance as well. For years, I somewhat amusedly thought of that afternoon's lecture as premature. There are some 10-year-olds for whom it would have been apt, but I was not one of them. It later occurred to me that we had not been working on my timetable, but his.
It's the end of part 1. Let's give it up for our amazing actors. That was the first part of Jelani Cobb's piece, The Old Man, from The New Yorker. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to hear the rest of his story before we talk about it together. I'm Brian Dories. This is Theater of War Productions, presented by WNYC. Back in a bit. I'm Brian Dories, and you're listening to Theater of War Productions, presented by WNYC. I'm Brian Dories, and you're listening to Theater of War Productions, presented by WNYC. Our series invites people to respond to journalism live in real time. We've just heard the actors Frankie Faison, Chad Coleman, and Michael Braugher perform the first part of a piece from The New Yorker called The Old Man. It's a story about what it means to be an older dad, and it was written by Jelani Cobb, who had his daughter Lennox at 47 and his twin sons August and Hollis at 50. Now, when you're an older parent, you've had a rich and complicated life before having kids, and sometimes those kids can't identify with the younger version of you. Jelani describes his father as one who was parenting with an eye on the clock, all too aware that the years in front of him were fewer than those behind, with no time to waste. Next up is the second part of Jelani Cobb's article. The Old Man, from The New Yorker. We'll listen, and then we'll talk about it. We're joined by a live audience here in New York and hundreds of people around the world who are tuning in via Zoom. Here's actor Chad Coleman to start off the second half of Jelani Cobb's piece.
All parenting is, on some level, a hedge against the inevitable. And my father suspected he was up against a somewhat less forgiving deadline. Having accumulated 6 decades of experience on the planet, Willie had decided that it was time to begin dispensing his takeaways. If any of it or all of it went over a boy's head, then he would just have to play catch up. The period talk was the first in a randomly delivered seminar series that covered boxing.
And now the position of a man's feet will tell you what punch he is about to throw.
Cooking.
Sour milk makes the best cornbread.
And electrical work.
You thread a wire into a fixture in the same direction that the screws on the fixture turn, then wrap it in electric tape.
Other gems were gleaned from his years as a country boy in the Harlem of the 1940s and 50s.
Never let a cop hand you anything.
He told me.
Is there a way of putting a way to put your fingerprints on something that doesn't belong to you?
Or,
If a guy bumps into you on the street, it's not necessarily because he didn't see you. First thing to do is look around and figure out what he's trying to mark you for.
part of adulthood typically entails deciphering who your parents are, not simply in relation to you, but also to the broader worlds in which they exist. That was a more complicated undertaking in my case, because Willie had been an adult twice as long as my peers' fathers had. The mystery of his prior life was that much more convoluted.
Years ago, I stumbled across an undated photo of my parents from the late 60s or early 70s. They're sitting in what appears to be a nightclub. My mother is nestled against my father, and his arm is draped proprietarily around her shoulder. He is wearing a crisp suit and leaning back in his chair, a portrait of the player in repose. I had no idea who these people were. Not the coquettish woman clearly smitten by this handsome man next to her, nor the well-dressed gentleman who looked as if he owned the joint.
By the time I'd reached adolescence, my father was firmly in his reflective years. He moved through life with less certainty than he'd possessed as a young man, and as a consequence, far less judgmentally. At 65, he was more interested in understanding why someone would prefer to talk than sing on a record, rather than in rejecting the entire enterprise. Adolescence brought other shifts. I eclipsed my father in height at the age of 14, a product of both a surge in which I grew 3 inches in a little more than a year, and the fact that he was no longer 6'2", as he had been in his prime. We were moving in opposite directions. When I went on calls with him, I was now the one who carried the bulk of the metal-sheathed BX electrical cable. From time to time, we'd go out to a job, and he would sit down on an overturned bucket and directed me as I pulled the cable and wired fixtures, taking pride in the fact that the craft that had allowed him to feed his family might one day do the same for me. The recollections of those days have been enshrined in the mythos of my father that I began burnishing when I was 23, following his death.
He went to the hospital with what his doctors suspected was a case of bladder stones, but was instead diagnosed as stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The primary physician told us that he had about 6 weeks to live. He made it to 5 weeks and 6 days. I took solace in the idea that, conscious of time, I had asked him everything that I needed to know, unaware of the fact that different stages of life bring their own set of questions. From my vantage point, he was an outlier, an older man from a small southern town who not only cooked and contributed to child rearing, but who was forward-thinking enough to insist that his son also learn to cook and understand the vagaries of the female reproductive system as well.
In the years following his death, I continued to get to know him through a series of epiphanies, the way that the subtler points in a film can occur to you long after you first see it. Walking to work one day when I was 30, I remembered that the first of his life lectures had been about the importance of avoiding drugs. He'd been motivated by tragedy. Alan had returned from Vietnam addicted to heroin. He got clean after several years in its thrall and was sober for a few years, but died of an ailment that we later realized was AIDS. My father talked to me about the perils of addiction the day after Alan died. Other pieces fell into place over time. Once, while teaching a class about the New Deal, I realized that my father had apprenticed as an electrician at roughly the same time that the Rural Electrification Act of 1936 had transformed overlooked locales such as Hazelhurst. His pride in his craft was not simply a working-class man identifying with his trade. It was rooted in the shrewdness of his own youthful decision-making. Not all these revelations were as endearing.
Your father was a terrible sexist who had no respect for women.
My Aunt Anne, his younger sister, said to me one afternoon when I visited her home in Los Angeles.
And that was why his marriage to Carol ended.
I was, by that point, in my 40s, and Anne was nearly 90. My father had come up during conversation about family history. Anne loved her big brother, but had not been blind to his faults. He'd been rigid and domineering as a young man, certain of the rectitude of his views and particularly dismissive of women's. Alan chafed at my father's heavy-handedness, and the two of them butted heads as he approached adulthood. Anne had also known Carol growing up in Georgia, and once, when she visited them in Harlem, Carol confessed to her that she was going to end the marriage because of my father's incessant womanizing, a situation that was underscored when one of Willie's girlfriends showed up at the apartment looking for him during Anne's visit. I told Anne that the man she described was wildly different from the one who raised me, to which she replied,
It's good that he eventually learned some things.
He was, perhaps, not the only one who did.
Older fathers tend to emphasize the extent to which their approach to parenting is informed by greater maturity and insight. Now, a friend whose children were born in his 40s told me that. A friend whose children were born in his 40s told me that. Having achieved a good number of his professional ambitions, he did not have to seek a balance between life and work. His children were his unquestioned priority. The landscape of the older fatherhood has begun to look different than the one that I was born into on my own family structure. The widespread availability of IVF treatments has contributed to a decrease in the age gap between older fathers and the mothers of their children. The punishing economics of labor market and housing costs that young people are trying to navigate may further exacerbate this trend. The portrait of a seasoned father is increasingly a middle-aged man whose age peer partner has given birth with the assistance of reproductive technologies.
I smirked when Lennox was born, and an excited set of new parents at the hospital asked me which of the babies was my grandchild. Part of me has subsequently wondered whether I had, on some level, sought to replicate the model of fatherhood I was most familiar with. I decided it was an unanswerable question and possibly beside the point. A friend whose father was 56 when he was born and whose own youngest child was born when he was 45 suggested to me that life seldom unfolds so predictably or intentionally. I have not subjected my still young children to any awkward life talks, but the clock registers in other ways. Last fall, a bout of lightheadedness landed me in an emergency room. After a battery of tests, I left with a prescription for a stronger blood pressure medication and a follow-up appointment for a more thorough examination. I pondered how much my children knew of me at this point and what impressions this graying iteration of me had made so far. I worried that they knew less about the queens of my origins than I knew of the Hazelhurst when I was small, which is how they came to possess Mets jerseys and tickets to Citi Field. These are my questions, not theirs. I've taken to playing along when Hollis asks, what feats of superhuman strength am I capable of?
Are you stronger than 10 bears?
He asks. He resembles me, and I sometimes recognize elements of his grandfather's face when I look at him. I understand what is beneath the question, an attempt to measure his own safety through a parent's ability to protect him. I recall the days when I thought my giant father was invincible, and I tell him, yes, as a matter of fact, I am.
That was Chad Coleman, Frankie Faison, and Mike Braugher. That was Chad Coleman, Frankie Faison, and Michael Braugher reading Jelani Cobb's piece for The New Yorker. Our actors are going to go find their place over here in their seats over here, and as they're doing that, we're going to move a few things up on stage just to get clear lines of sight. But I want to just, because we have fleeting time together here tonight, both those of you watching on Zoom and those in the room, we want to squeeze everything we can out of our time together. Plant my feet and ask you the question we ask all audiences at the beginning of all of our discussions, and that's this. You're the first people on the planet Earth to have heard Jelani Cobb's article. It hasn't even dropped in the New Yorker yet. And it was a sacred experience, I know for me. I don't know if it was for you to be here, to be in the room with those words as they were spoken for the first time. So as you were listening to Jelani's article, what resonated with you? What touched you? What was true? It's a hand over here. Yeah. Coming right to you. Go ahead.
As an older father, my son is 17, and I was 46 when he was born. The story resonated with me because of what he said toward the end of how, as an older dad, you tend to have this idea that, I'm trying to think as I'm a little nervous, but you have this idea that your generations apart, and you try your best to be available to your child, and you know you don't have a lot of time left, so you do as much as you can. And that's what kind of related with me the most, is just being present as much as you can, because you know your time is very precious and valuable with your son. So,
thank you so much for being the first to speak. It's great to have an older father's perspective in the room, a perspective of being conscious of the fleeting possibility of having an exchange with your child before you're no longer here. And such a powerful thing to bring into the room right at the beginning of the discussion. Thank you for kicking us off. You don't have to be an older father. You can be a child. Yeah, over here. I see someone over here. Yeah, go right ahead.
All right. I'm Don Sinkfield. I had the honor of meeting Willie Lee Cobb. Jelani's one of my best friends. We've known each other since we were 13. And, you know, what touched me was that we, you know, generally we do see our fathers as superheroes. And Willie was a big man, and he was definitely a superhero to us. You know, he was around, always watching, and being this person that would observe the little mistakes we were making with our friends. And, you know, you shouldn't be talking about people behind their back. That boy is not here to defend himself, or something like that, he would say to us. And so it's just very touching on a personal level to hear some things even that I never heard before about Jelani's father.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so great to have one of Jelani's friends who knew Jelani's father in the room. And to bring that perspective and those stories, to bring his father to him. I see you have the mic in your hand. Go right
Yes.
ahead.
Jelani is also one of my best friends.
Wonderful. You don't have to be one of Jelani's friends to speak.
Yeah.
Unless you're all Jelani's friends, and then you can all welcome to speak. Yeah, please go ahead.
I've never met his dad, but I did have the honor of meeting his mom. But he talked often about his father, and one of the things that made me chuckle as I was listening to this was that his mention of the female anatomy and you know, kind of what that meant, and things I will not mention. Jelani, you don't have to worry. I'm not going to reveal what you shared with me, but I thought that you know, he was very blessed to have had a father that took that kind of time to talk to him about those kinds of things, where a lot of people don't really have that opportunity. So he sounded like he was a really great man, and I love the stories that he would tell me about his dad and the stories when he was in Harlem, and some of the experiences that he had, even with some of the politicians and some of the people within Harlem. I mean, it was like kind of a real history lesson to listen to some of the things about his father. So he sounded like he was excellent. But Jelani is also an excellent father, and I see where, even though he's an older dad, he's really, really present with his sons. I can tell his children really look up to him. They're really, really great kids, very, very, very smart like him. So you know, he's really great. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you guys brought into the room, and it's so great to hear people who knew Jelani or Jelani's dad or know Jelani as a father. We're going to go to some folks on Zoom in a second, but I see there's a hand over, and don't want to neglect this section of the room. Yeah, over here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Stephen Reed. What I took from it is from when he, like for me as a young adult, right? I have kids as well, but also watching, my father died when I was 15, so I lost my father at a young age. But from him saying that he's watching his grandfather do certain things around the house and stuff like that, which unconsciously just, as I'm teaching my kid, it just hits me. And I was like, I remember when I did this with my dad, and it's just the memories that we have, and knowing that his father wasn't really educated, but he made a way for it. So it's like, that was very motivational to hear too.
So powerful. Thank you so much for sharing your story too. I see we've lit up the board in the center section. We'll go there, and then we'll go to a couple people on screen, including Jelani, who I see is waiting and was all along listening to everyone's comments over here. Yeah, go right ahead.
Hello. I would like to impose on behalf of the stepfathers. I'm not with...
You can take the mic in your hand, by the way.
Yes,
yeah.
Hello, everyone. Happy Father's Day. I'm not with any biological children in my lifetime. God bless that. But I had the golden opportunity of raising 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy. And not too many years ago, but a nice while ago, the boy, he was 16, I think, at the time. He messaged me, a messenger, out the blue, all on his own. And he said, I cried. He said, I just want to thank you for everything you did for us. You didn't have to do that. Thank you. I just want to thank you. You know, he kept repeating it a little bit. You know, he was 16 years old. And it just, it overwhelmed me because, you know, I'm not his biological father. Yes, his biological father is still on earth, but was absent in his life. You know, a little roughness going on there. And I met his mother, and, you know, I did the role, you know, and I did it triumphantly and didn't mind working the overtime hours, didn't mind providing. I went from a family of 1 to a family of 5 overnight. I moved in and with her the next day I met her. And yeah, and
that was very fast.
The gift of very fast. So, you know, I looked at it as a blessing from God to all the stepfathers, to all the men and women who may look into adoption. It was triumphant for me to have that experience, and I held it down, and I got the reward of a lifetime. Years later, him messaging me and telling me thank you.
Oh, so beautiful. Thank you
God.
so much. I think there was a hand right here, right in front of you. I just want to say, you know, this is a story about the families we have and also the families we make. I mean, in New York City, we make family as well. You know, you have your biological family, and then it's so powerful to hear about that our bonds can transcend our blood, and we can be as much a father to someone as someone who is biologically related to that person, and step into a hole that someone might have in their life. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah, over to you, and then we're going to go to Zoom. Right over
Great.
here.
My name's Howard Gordon, and what resonated with me most was the passion and levity and joy which the actors read. And I also was impressed by how they read, and it was a gift to us and to receive Jelani's writing to explain the relationship between his father and learning about the things that his father spoke about and imparted upon Jelani, I felt was a gift, in that these moments that he was teaching Jelani provided a teaching to me in looking inside myself in my relationship with my father, and also me being a father. And at the same time, my wife's relationship with her father and how that changes over time. As we get older, our thought process changes and our relationship changes. And having received this reading, I feel so enriched that not only from the actors, but man, you know, Dr. Cobb, man, you really hit us in the head with that one. That's a beautiful piece. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much. We're going to go to Dr. Cobb. Jelani, you've been waiting for some time on Zoom. What resonated with you hearing your own piece read aloud for the first time?
First, I want to just say thank you to everybody for coming out. And it's amazing, you know, to sign in to the Zoom and see a whole group of people who are there in the audience, you know, anticipating hearing something that you labored over. And I also really want to say thank you to Mr. Faison and Mr. Coleman and Mr. Braugher, you know, for really kind of bringing that piece to life. And then finally, I'm also appreciative that people have been so candid and open and sharing, you know. I was very touched by the gentleman who talked about his experience as a stepfather. And, you know, I really get that. You know, I've been a stepfather as well. And, you know, as was my father. And, you know, and thank you to the people who I know personally who've come out. And then finally, I think one of the interesting things that I hope other people kind of relate to is that I typically, when I was younger, I thought of the process of getting to know someone as something that happened in their lifetime. And in writing this piece, it made me kind of grapple with the idea of how much better I know my father now, decades after he's been gone, than I did when he was here, and that we're always kind of in dialogue. And, you know, he was a boxer. And so I think of him now as, you know, my corner man, you know, that I have this storehouse of things that he told me and he taught me that I fall back on when I'm encountering situations that he would never have imagined me in. He would never have like thought of. But, you know, I take the things that I learned from him and apply them in all these different circumstances. So just thank you to all of you for being willing to participate and coming out and listening.
Thank you so much, Jelani. Thank you for the gift of your piece, and thanks for being with us and for joining us on Zoom. Lena, you've been waiting for some time. What resonated with you tonight?
Yes, I just want to say before I start speaking, Happy Father's Day to all the dads. And also, I want to say that I really resonate with this piece. I don't have an older father, but I have an older grandfather. And back in my home country, having children, being remarried, and having children with different age ranges super normal. But to Western culture's eyes, it's not. So I really relate a lot with what he said, especially with time, because when you're older, you don't really have time to spend with your loved ones. And having an older grandfather who had multiple children, my time with him was really limited. So it really made me appreciate more the little times that I had, even though I was really young and I didn't really understand the concept of death and that he was gonna leave very soon. So I really appreciated that. Like the work is really great. The actors did a good job. I really loved it.
Thank you so much, Lena. Thanks for what you brought into the room and sharing your perspective and your culture's perspective. I'm going to shift gears to a second question. or to another question, and it's going to move us in a different direction. And you can ignore my questions. You can make up your own questions. You can say a beautiful statement. You can respond to something someone said in the room or on Zoom. We've got a little time left together. We want to move through a couple themes. I'm going to break after that question, and then we'll come back in and ask one or two more. But this is a question that sort of has been rattling around in my head as I was listening to the piece, because the piece is very much about beautiful and sacred and transcendent moments of parenting and how they continue past the life of someone when they're a father. But it's also about how we struggle as parents, or aspirationally, people who want to be parents, to not do exactly what our parents did to us. So I'm going to ask this question. It's a hard question, and it's taking a different tack. But it's, whether you're a parent or you hope to be a parent someday, how do you want a parent that's different from how you were parented? See a few hands go up. There's a hand right. Yeah, and then we'll go right there. Go ahead. Yeah.
How's it going? My name is Chris Mendel, and I actually just got into the journalism school, so Dean Cobb is about to be in charge of me over there. So I think that this piece was incredible. It really shows why Dean Cobb is a master at journalism and a master storyteller. I mean, he even went to intersperse humor to get the tenderness of the piece across. And he let us feel the impact of the piece by letting it breathe. I think it's a complete masterclass in writing, and I'm thankful to be one of the first to heard it. As far as something that stood out to me, it's what you said, that each phase of life comes with different questions. Because I'm turning 30 this year, and I'm thinking about life, and every time I think I have it figured out, there's another question that comes up. And my relationship with my dad is complicated. So on the topic of thinking about how I wish I was parented, I wish I had someone to go and I asked these questions to. And I remember the guidance I received in childhood. And at times, it's almost like I lost the parent. So looking towards the future, this is something I want to make sure I impose my wisdom and knowledge as I grow onto my child that I don't currently get. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's great to have a young perspective in the room and a new student at the School of Journalism. Want to respond to the question? Yeah, go right ahead.
How you doing? My name is Star Kim. One of the things that I did as a parent that differs from the way my parents parent me was I didn't discipline my kids the way they disciplined me. I didn't beat my kids. I believe that my education informed me that physical harm to the child, right, over times deteriorates his moral stability, right? And this discipline method stems from slaveries that the slaves adopted from their colonizers, right, and their slave masters with the beatings, right? So to me, I didn't want to transfer this tradition onto my children. I didn't want them to discipline their children that way. So I believe that I'm attempting to break that.
Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you. There's a hand over here. You're one of my best customers, but I wouldn't deny you the hand. You go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Stephen Reed. To piggyback on what the gentleman said about the discipline part, that's another way that I don't discipline my kids as far as like beating and stuff like that. I actually talk to them with like compassion and like sometimes disappointment, instead of like yelling and screaming. And sometimes when I was younger, I didn't know why I was getting in trouble. I just knew I was about to get a beating. So now I like to just talk to my kids and let them understand them and guide them in certain things. Even if there's something that they want to do, if it's wrong to me, I'll still guide them through it just so they could experience it in their own way, instead of just, no, you can't do that, So just give them the chance to experience their own life instead of me pushing onto my experiences onto them.
Thank you so much. Is that a hand? If your hand comes above your shoulder, I'll be all over you. Yeah, I just want right there. Yeah. Thank you so much for that.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christian. Shout out to Dr. Cobb and the actors. You guys are amazing. I would say I'm 35 years old, and I have a daughter that just turned 12. In regards to the question, I believe it takes a lot of relearning and therapy to find out why our parents even operated the way that they did. So a lot of times, I know for the background that I come from, everything happened so fast. My parents had me at 19 and 20 years old, and life was just You were out of the house, you were on your own, trying to figure out life, and they did great for themselves. Didn't reach full success until their late 30s, early 40s with city jobs. My father was a New York City detective. My mom was a teacher. So they did well for themselves, but they passed on they operated by what they saw. So I feel like with my generation, we have an opportunity to really sit back and say, okay, well, before we continue this, why would we continue this? And what is the logic and real perspective? Are there real positive results to pass on to the next generation or not? Because if it's not, then it would be considered a generational curse that we should sever now and take a new approach. So I think that's my angle now. I do agree with the gentleman that was saying that the discipline, I realized that growing up, a lot of the approach when it came down to discipline, that parents would be so stressed out that they would be disciplining us, but that energy that came with that was also because of what they were dealing with. And that takes a lot of self-reflecting. Now as adults, you can have a conversation, but you couldn't say when you were younger, oh, I'm not even guilty of what you're disciplining me for right now. You know, so that's what we can pass on to the next generation, to actually have an open dialogue. And if we're called out on something, not manipulating them to think that they're being disrespectful for calling us out on our behavior. That's all.
Thank you so much. I'm getting so much from everything people have said. Yeah, let's go up in the front. But I love this idea that parenthood and being a father in particular, because we're here talking about fathers, is this opportunity is for peace. It's an opportunity to disrupt violence. It's an opportunity to intervene and to stop the curse that's been passed down from colonialist past and from slavery. It's like these things that are coming into the room, like there's this moment that we have the ability to make a change. It's not just interpersonally for our children, but it's for the world. It's such a powerful and sacred thing to bring into the room. Sir.
Hi, good evening. My name is Angel Jimenez. Dr. Jelani, thank you. Dr. Cobb, thank you very much. That was a very nice piece. I just want to touch on something. You know, being a parent now, I finally realized that there is no right way to parent or wrong way to parent. We learn as we go. And everything that I thought my parents did wrong, I found out that I had to do the same things with my kids growing up. You know, I am one that, you know, I grew up old school. You know, I believe, you know, spare the rod, spoil the child. And I think that that actually works because for 6,000 years of human history, we didn't have the problems in society that we have now, where there's a certain apathy among our young ones that the value of life has diminished. You know, it seems like our youth today are so detached, and they don't have the empathy or the compassion. It's like they think that life is like playing on your PlayStation or your Xbox. You push the reset button and start it over again. But that's not the way it works. Life is precious, you know, and if you love someone, you correct them. My father corrects me out of love. When you punish somebody, you punish them out of love, because if you don't punish them and you're not correcting them, it means you don't really care. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. There's a hand back there, I think, that may be lit up by what you said, and I love that this room can hold all of these different positions and also perspectives on this key question of discipline and punishment and love and the opportunity of fatherhood and of parenthood now. Sir, you've been waiting to speak. Go right ahead.
Yes, my name is Struggle. I'm listening to what's transpiring. I'm hearing a lot of narratives in a room, but I'm also hearing a space that's not being verbalized, being vocalized. We have a detachment with our generation that's coming up now. And we tend to identify them as being wrong, having devaluation has transpired. We have to stop and look. With this reading by Dr. Cobb was talking about cycles, was talking about disrupting some cycles and continuing some. It was talking about a legacy, right? So if we disrupt, meaning we look at these younger individuals as being maladjusted, as being someone that doesn't have this respect for life or whatever, we're gonna treat them that way, and they're gonna feed off that energy. I'm a stepfather. I don't have personal children, so at this junction, my ideas of fatherhood is about a community. I was raised by individuals around me, the men around me. My father wasn't present. So when we talk about our generations, these younger generations and these children that are coming up, we have to remember that it's a community thing. We have to remember it's about restoring those ties and those bonds, like Dr. Cobb's story was talking about that cycle, right? And some things we have to let off. So if you remember, there's an old saying thing where, oh, your music is, it's crazy, it sounds this, and I'm not gonna listen to it, it has no value. And then we were saying that. And now we have a generation that we're saying that about. And remember how you felt when your father or your mother or that family, that parent figure said that I don't like your music, it's crazy, it's this and that, whatever. It caused you to feel disconnected. So I think, and that what comes to mind and what I want to do differently is have us look at fatherhood as a community effort, as a filling in blanks for our absent fathers, for our fathers that aren't functioning like the stepfathers, for those that aren't active. And if we look at it from that perspective, I think we will be better in a better condition.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm going to take a quick break, you guys. I apologize, but it's a radio show, so I'm going to take this real quick, and then we're going to come right back into the last two questions I'm going to ask you as an audience. So, I'm Brian Dorries, and you've been listening to a live performance of Theater of War Productions presented by WNYC. We just listened to Jelani Cobb's article from The New Yorker about what it means to be an older dad with younger children. At Theater of War Productions, we always invite people with something at stake to our events, as is obvious tonight. Here in New York, and all over the world on Zoom, our audience is filled with fathers and grandfathers, sons and daughters, spouses and friends, who've all come to talk about parenting and fatherhood and community. So I just want to take us in one other direction. I know some folks have been waiting on Zoom, so we're going to go up there in a second, but maybe one person in the audience can respond. We've neglected this side of the room, so we'll go right to you, but I'm going to ask the question. Hopefully you can fold all of your thoughts into a response. There are many beautiful things in this piece. There's a beautiful vulnerability when Jelani talks about also what I might consider the sins of the father. When he brings up, his aunt brings up the womanizing of when he was younger and the way he'd behaved, and his son doesn't recognize that father. So I've asked you about parenting, but there are a lot of children in the room here as well. We're all children. Some of us not as young as others, but we're all children. And I guess the question I have to ask you is, do you think it's possible to transcend the sins of the father? And you don't have to answer that question, I know, but, and I guess I would also say, is it possible to hold the good and the bad in one space? Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to address the question before this one, but I'll address this one first.
Yeah, sure.
The son saw in his father, right, something good and the positive impact on what his father did with little to no formal education. He didn't let that stop him to becoming a great father and to providing what he needed to provide for his house, his home, his family. I want to go back to that's all I have on that question.
Yeah, thank you. No, I appreciate that. Yeah.
But on the previous question, what I would bring into, say if I was to have another child, I actually have 2 grandchildren. So for my grandchildren, what I would instill to them is don't let technology do the work for you. I would bring back the old school hardcover book, the paperback book, so they can have the joy of reading and writing and coming up with their own thesis statements or their own thoughts and, being able to explore that aspect of the learning process. Thank you.
I would add the radio to that too, maybe too. There's a hand right here, and then yeah, let's go here and here because we've neglected this section. Yeah, right here, and then we'll go to the Zoom because we had some people waiting up there. Please go right ahead.
Hi everyone. So when the author was talking about how he learned things about his father as an adult, it's kind of what resonated with me because I was actually having this conversation with my aunt today about my own relatives. Now that I'm an adult, I'm realizing things and learning things about parents and relatives that I didn't really know as a kid. But I think that's part of what makes our parents human, right? I think when we're young and even as adults, we kind of see our parents as like these superhuman figures. But learning about their flaws or the mistakes they've made doesn't make them any less of a superhuman. I think it makes them more of a superhuman being because in spite of their flaws, they were able to create these wonderful lives and have these beautiful children that admire them no matter what. So that's what resonated with me, and that's what I had to think about that.
I love that answer. Thank you so much. There was a hand right in front of you. Yeah, thank you.
To answer your first question, yes, I do believe the sins of your father could be transferred to you as well. I think I've committed some of the sins that my father committed. I don't have any children right now, and I want to also answer to the other question. When I do have opportunity to have children, I don't want to parent from a controlling aspect of like ownership, and I want my children to be allowed to speak and express themselves. So when I was a child, I had West Indian parents. It was don't ask no questions. And unfortunately, I had to go out and seek answer to my questions from areas that I shouldn't have been seeking those answers from. And the answers that I took, I ran with it and it led me down a certain path. I'm not blaming my parents. They only knew how to parent from the standpoint of what they knew. You know, there's no one-on-one parenting for dummies out here. You know, you just got to go based on what you know or what you was told from their parents. And for me, what I learned from that experience was that when I do have children, I will allow my children to express themselves. I would try to see them for who they are, as such as myself. I was a curious child, but I was misinterpreted as being a destructive child because my father was a master builder and he would be messing with the light fixture over here, but the light would come on over there. So he wouldn't explain to me, so I'll wait for he to disappear and I'll go over there with a knife and trying to figure it out. And this could have been a teachable moment, but instead I got a beating. You're destructive. It could have been like, no, this what goes on, Junior. You got to, this wire here, this wire.
Yeah.
But I wasn't told that, and unfortunately, it just led me to, I'm not asking no question. I'm just going to figure things out on my own. And as a child, how can you figure things out on your own? You don't even know what the hell you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you taking on the question. You know, we're as people who are aspirational being parents or parents, we're trying to learn from our parents what they did right, what they didn't do as well, and be better. But we're also trying as children to, process and grow and transcend the things that were passed down to us. Sometimes us even knowing it at the time that it was happening, as was evidenced by some of the things people brought up earlier about being disciplined and not knowing why they were being hit or hurt. Selma, you've been waiting for some time on Zoom. I want to get to some folks around the world, and we're going to move the energy out there for a second. Selma, what question do you want to respond to? You pick.
I want to respond to the piece around work and the whole thing about learning about electricity and doing the trade there. My father did not have a formal education either. And there were 5 of us, all girls. But he was a bus driver, he was a taxi driver. And at the age of 45, he left his job with the New York City MapStoa and started his own business. And he was doing washing machine and refrigeration repair. And I kept saying, how did he know all of this? How did he, but he took care of the whole family. My mom didn't work. And I worked for him 1 year during the summer. And at the end of that summer, I said, when I get to be about 45, I'm going to open my own business because I just marveled at his ability to do the trade and develop relationships with his, customers where he got referrals and repeat business. And my dad died when I was 30, but at age 45, I opened up my own business, so that was just such a blessing to have had that experience. And the other thing around the world of work when my father was a bus driver, every Sunday, we would meet him on his route. And for his meal, we would share with him what happened during the week. And he would introduce us to the customers and all. And it was just, really a wonderful bonding experience, and so I really appreciated that, and that aspect of the story really brought all of those memories back. So thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing those, Selma. I really appreciate it. Maureen, what do you want to speak to tonight? Thank you for your patience.
I have been so touched by everything that everyone has said that I almost lost track of what I wanted to say. But mostly I want to thank Dr. Cobb, because rarely have I read anything written by a man that is so generous and is full of such love and intimacy. And it's an incredible piece. And I'm going to bring it to the attention of everyone I know, because it's just wonderful.
Which we're thrilled to be able to announce. Thank you so much, Maureen. Carol, you've been waiting for some time. What did you want to speak to tonight?
Well, what I wanted to speak to is the fact that, because Dr. Cobb was so honest and so genuine about this, is how your opinions and beliefs about your father just transform throughout your life. And it goes from absolutely idolizing them to like, oh, that wasn't so great, to, and then to empathy for how difficult it was. I lost my father about a year ago, and this has reminded me of so many, so many memories of times when my dad just hit the nail on the head. And I really appreciate that. It's a good feeling for as we head into Father's Day weekend. Thank you, Dr. Cobb.
Thank you so much. Carol, you've been waiting for some time. Over to you. Or was that just Carol? I'm sorry. Carol, thank you. Seema, I think that's how you say it. Seema.
Hi, it's actually Shema. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Jelani Cobb, for this beautiful piece. I think for me, what was so revelatory and moving, as someone who's known Dr. Cobb for years, I'm an alum of the J School, and I'm lucky to call him one of my mentors. And I'm a reader of his work. What was so revelatory for me is that although the story might be the most explicitly personal and autobiographical piece by Dr. Cobb, I actually feel like he's been writing about and around his father for years. If you're a reader of Dr. Cobb, you know that reflections on aging and mortality and fatherhood as a Black man, as a Black artist and writer, are in a lot of his work. For example, there's this beautiful piece about the 50th anniversary of hip hop a couple of years ago, and even his recent interview with Ryan Coogler. So it was just really moving for me to be able to sort of see where it all comes from, and the sort of thread that I've noticed throughout his work.
Thank you so much. It's great to have so many students of Dr. Cobb in the room. I'm sure there are lots of people who have never heard of Jelani's writing, and so it's great to have such a mixture of people responding. I see there's a hand in the back. I'm wondering if Joanne is there, because I was going to go one last time at June if Joanne is there.
Sorry, I'm a little nervous. I haven't done this before, so bear with me. First of all, it was a beautiful piece, so thank you, Dr. Cobb, for sharing this. I guess what really touched me about this was the importance of role models in our families. And role models can be either in a positive way or a negative way. My own dad, I'm not a parent myself. Both of my parents have passed. Tomorrow is actually my dad's birthday, so I'll be thinking of him tomorrow. And my dad and I loved my dad dearly, but we had a difficult relationship. He was very much abused as a child, and by the time he became a parent, he really didn't know how to parent. And when he did parent, he was very much a disciplinarian, which I appreciate. But he traveled a lot as well, so it was very difficult to connect with him. And there were times I wished I could have relied on him more. I was very fortunate in that when my own dad wasn't available, there was a very, very close family friend who I would turn to periodically for guidance and help. And he was like a second dad to me. He was a family friend, that's it. But so I guess that's what I wanted to say. Parents can come, they can be biological parents, they can be step parents, they can be chosen parents that we bring into our lives, and just the importance of role models, and how important they are in our life. I'm sorry, I'm I'm nervous. I think that's all I can say.
You did beautifully, Joanne. Thank you. Bringing the complexity of your own relationship with your father into the room and rendering it so vividly for us, and nothing to apologize about at all. Thank you so much for joining us. It was so powerful to hear your story. I know we have a hand in the back, and there's a hand now in the front. I'm gonna and some best customers who want to talk again, and that's okay. 'Cause we have about 9 minutes left, and I want to get through a couple of things. So I'm gonna ask a question. You can ignore it again, but and maybe it's speaking to something you're thinking about talking about. But the piece begins and ends with the wisdom of children. Jelani reflecting on watching his father darken his gray hairs in his beard, and then Jelani's son asking him how strong he is. And I've heard a lot of people talking about how when they want to parent or they're parenting, they want to listen to their children, and they want to see them as autonomous beings that maybe have something to teach us as much as we have something to teach them. So I'm wondering if you've ever, as a child of a parent, had the ability to break through to your father and do or say something that changed him or changed your relationship, or maybe changed you. And again, you can ignore the question, but we're going to go back here. You can fold your answer into it. Someone else will raise their hand and take it on. Don't worry. Go right ahead. Yeah.
Hi. I'm currently 23, so I'm like a young adult experiencing like having a dad and fatherhood, like, well, Father's Day coming up. And I have both a stepdad and a biological dad who was not, we have a complicated relationship. He was not active or present in my life. But I think, back to the previous question, and then I maybe might answer this question.
Thank you.
But can the sins of our fathers transcend the relationship or them as people? I don't know, because at this point of young adulthood and as a young woman coming into life, I think my parents had me really young, and they probably didn't know what they were doing. But now I have to navigate how I view men in like romantic partnerships, in the workplace, in like relationship, like friendship based. Like I just have to I have to figure out how, like what my view is of that, while having like this complicated relationship with my dad and seeing him as a superhero, and then finding out that he is a sinful man. He's not perfect, he's imperfect. And sort of having, so I don't know, but I think I think we have to learn how to accept that, and learn to accept that they do have to transcend from their sins, and all of us have to ourselves, by empathizing, by accepting them as for who they are, and for ourselves. I think we have to do that. So, yeah.
I like the answer that it's not even a question. We have to. If we're going to survive, if we're going to have meaningful relationships with other people, any gender, if we're going to make families of our own, we can't be buried under the mistakes that were made. And the only way to that, I hear you saying, is probably empathy for the fact that many parents don't know what they're doing. They're just trying to do their best, even if it had really negative impacts on us as children.
Yeah. So we have to transcend their sins, and for ourselves as well, to come into this new space of being and change and evolution as being. So we have to accept them for what they were, who they are, and what they may become. I think so.
Thank you so much. Very beautifully said. You're one of my best customers. I promise I'm not going to go. Yes, you've been waiting for some time. Yes. Here we go. Yeah, thank you.
My name's Devon Allah. I'm 26. I'm not unfortunately blessed to be a father yet, but I am a godfather. My brother had passed his late holidays, and it's been an ordeal trying to figure out what to do and how to step up. Thank you, Dr. Cobb, for your piece. It resonated with me a lot, especially about being present. My father wasn't present in my life for 25 years. He is present now. He's actually in the back, which is mad dope. But right there, yeah. But thank you. But what's big about it right now is how he's trying to be as present as he can. He missed out on 25 years of my life being incarcerated, but everything I could say since he's been home, September 17th, he's been stepping up and he's been helping out. As a reflection on what I want to be and how I'm trying to be for my nephew. Actually, tomorrow is Daddy with Donuts Day, so I'm gonna pop out and go do that with him. But it's just being present and being there and just showing my nephew and my future kids that in life, even though you make decisions, you have to be able to live with those decisions and move forward and have the hard conversations. I've had the hard conversation with my father. That's why we able to have this dope, relationship that I have with him now. I'm starting to have the hard conversations, and I've been having the hard conversations with my nephew. So I just want to be able to move forward and still grow and have him know, like, yo, my god, daddy, uncle is always going to be here for him, and have that be a reflection on how I have it with my own kids someday. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Sorry, tomorrow's Daddy with Donuts Day? Okay. I'm going to bring my daughter some donuts on the... I appreciate that so much. I hear you saying, to a certain extent, in your beautiful story about you and your father, who are both here in the room with us, that sins is an unfortunate word, and it's just a phrase because it carries a sort of moral weight. I don't really personally like it very much because I think we're talking about mistakes or errors or habits or, but that in some ways having a healing relationship with a child, even if you've maybe not been there for that child or harmed that child or not done the right thing by that child at some other point, it has a reciprocity. It moves in both directions. And that's such a beautiful thing to acknowledge, that it's not about transcending sins, it's about connecting in spite of and across these real hard experiences that you brought into the room. I really appreciate that. There's a hand over here, and I'm going to ask the last question in the fleeting moments we have. Yeah.
How you doing? My name is Rodell. What that young brother just said definitely resonated with me because I also had a complicated relationship with my father as a young man, but as I became older, we got a lot closer, and he showed me that it's never too late. It's never too late to connect. And something was mentioned about how our children, how the kids nowadays are kind of disrespectful and all that. But I think us as adults, as older adults, we have to keep in mind that those are our babies, and we can't give up on them. You know, just like a lot of people didn't give up on us. And accountability is definitely in order. You know, if they're failing, that means somewhere we failed. So we should keep that in mind before we come down on these young ones and try to talk to them instead of talking at them. You know what I'm saying? Because I remember when I was young and the older brothers used to talk at me, I wasn't hearing it, but there were some brothers that talked to me. And guess what? They're probably a big reason why I'm still here right now. You know what I mean? So let's keep that in mind when we talk about these kids, all right?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everything you said. We have time for maybe just one last exchange, and just want to say, this is an article. This is a beautiful essay. It's about parenting. It's about fatherhood. It's also very much about death. It's about mortality. And there's this phrase at the center of the piece that Jelani writes about, talking about watching his father parent with an eye on the clock. And my eye's on the clock right now because we're about to be done. But I wonder what, now that you've heard all these people in the room respond to Jelani's piece, and you've heard the sort of collective wisdom and perspectives of everyone here, how is that phrase, parenting with an eye on the clock, sitting with you now? What does it mean to you? And there's a hand over. You've got the hand. You're going to be brief because you're our best customer, because I want to make sure I give her the mic. But
Sure.
go right ahead.
I'm gonna try to be fast.
Oh, sorry. She beat you to the punch.
Oh.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Even better.
My name is Odessa. I just want to say this. My father was around, but he wasn't present. What I will say is I understood who he was, and I had to grow up by myself. When we talked about, this gentleman talked about community, we are that. Everything we talk about right now, we're gonna take this home with us. I'm listening to what you're saying, I'm listening to what you're saying, and whether it's somebody's kids, my godkids, the purpose of situations like this is to take these moments and grow from them, right? And teach, right? Where we don't have that plateau, that platform to do so, this is what that is. My father right now, he could barely walk. And he calls me and he begs me to come over there, and sometimes he gotta get wiped down, and I'm here now because I have my own medical issues and he has his own. But when the time was there for us to be father and daughter, we didn't have that. But I respect the fact that because of him, I'm here. And that's still my father. And as much as I want to help him, I help him as much as I can. But I also understand that I had a lot of other dudes in the street that were more daddies to me than he was. So I got to respect who I can respect, but I would never disrespect him because he's still my father. But ultimately, I am who I am, and I better myself every day because I understand that we all come from different aspects of life. The beautiful stories you guys have about your fathers, people on Zoom, the interaction with your daddies, I didn't have that. So I respect that, and I wish I did, but I know what I got, so.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like at the center of the piece, and also what you just shared, is also a kind of a longing that is so powerful to hear. You named it so beautifully, and in the piece, a longing to be able to pick up the phone and connect with somebody that was in your life and no longer is, and how you took it for granted, or maybe you never had the connection. A longing to still have the connection that never happened. That longing lives within all of us, even if we had good relationships, especially if we didn't. So I'm really grateful. You've got the mic, and maybe one last person who hasn't spoken. You're making it hard. You guys are making it really hard.
Yeah, this is a real powerful experience, especially hearing the young man talk about his relationship with his father, and then the father previously talking about his experience. And I'm reminded of my father and talking about the sins of the father. My father was deceased when I was 20 years of age, and various aspects of his behavior, I swore that I would not be like my father. And as time passed, I found that I became my father in many ways. But he also gave me a lot of love, which was something that I was able to pull from and to work through those limitations that he instilled within me. And when you talk about transcending, the love and the memories and getting support from other people. These are ways to transcend. The other thing is, too, technology. You know, here we have Zoom, and the relationship that kids could have with their fathers or their parents that we didn't have 20 years ago. How, you know, AT&T had this saying, long distance is the next best thing to being there. But this is a game changer. So another way to transcend the relationship and maybe limitations that were instilled within us. Thanks a lot for this, Mr.
Boy, thank you.
Donaldson.
I'm taking you on the road. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I wish the first time we did one of these, we had, you know, this was back in 2007 for 400 Marines in a Hyatt ballroom in San Diego. We scheduled a 45-minute discussion. Discussion lasted 3.5 hours and had to be cut off at midnight. And I know this could be an endurance event. I know we're just starting to have the conversation that we should be having. And hopefully people will stick around the lobby. We'll continue talking. We didn't come here to tie a bow on this. We just wanted to open something up with the help of Jelani's beautiful words, so that we could acknowledge how it touched us. And I've been touched by so many things that people have said in the room so far. So I feel like I can't choose because so many people raised their hands over here, but maybe we'll go. He seemed pretty emphatic back there. So no pressure to sum everything up into one perfect statement, but you're going to have the last word of our conversation this evening. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot to unpack here. My name is Peter. I commend Dr. Cobb for his piece, also the actors as well, expressing his piece. And what I got out of all of this tonight, especially with all the stories, it's complex, I believe. Everything is a case-by-case basis. I have 3 children. Now all 3 children are by the same mother. So all of them, I have a different relationship. And as much as I try to reach out to my oldest, she wants nothing to do with me. So when I think about what you said as far as time.
Thank you for taking that on.
There's this legacy thing. And all 3 of my children are gonna have 3 different stories about my legacy, which is unfortunate. So it's like, it is different on every type of level and every type of kids. I was raised with both my parents, with same siblings, different from my parents. So, but we all grew up different. Like we all same household. When the gentleman spoke about beatings and whatnot, it didn't work for me, but it worked for my brother, you know. So it's different. So it's very complex. That's all. It's what I mean. So I guess it's always going to be a challenge, but I do believe that the answers are right in front of us. It's with our community. It's in the household. It's with our parents. As we get older, we start seeing the things we adopted from our parents, and then we start adopting into our children. It's a certain way of raising our children. I think it's about compassion and just being aware, because time does change, but the situation is still the same. So in order for us to build off the legacy and trying to change and to make things better, I think the answers are in front of us, and it's all about focusing on those answers, because it might not be straightforward, you know, but as long as we stay focused and you know, and just pay attention and just communicate and understanding our children, I believe that we could flourish, you know, and understand and become better parents as well as better children. Because it's not, in this day and age, I believe it's not like we're telling our kids to do anything anymore. It's like we're asking now. And it's like, I feel like our kids is like parenting us in a way and trying to tell us what to do. And it's just complex. And I just believe if we just continue the conversation, we'll see the progress.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. As a last word, I appreciate you acknowledging the complexity of it. I appreciate what you said about time, because on one hand, this is about mortality, this line about looking at the clock, keeping around the clock. But I hear you saying it's also about how every relationship with every child is almost its own time unto itself. And it's also about presence and having an understanding of one's mortality, and also what the fleeting possibility of what might shape that child and your role in that, to be present when it counts in the moment with each child on their own terms. And that's such a powerful thing to bring into the room. And these questions about discipline and what we had modeled for us, we're not going to resolve them here tonight. I will say this, though. I'm the son of 2 psychologists. My mother's watching. She'll deny this, what I'm about to tell you. It's not a story of abuse. It's a story of the opposite of abuse. I was never punished. Not once. Because what psychologists know, and they don't get everything right, is that the strongest shaper of human behavior is positive reinforcement, not negative. Telling people what they did right, not what they did wrong. I'm sorry to get moralistic about it, but we wouldn't be having this conversation in this way tonight had I not been showered with love. So I hope my mom is watching right now. I want to say this. I'm going to just go here and say we're not going to resolve this conversation, tie a bow on it tonight. Hopefully you'll stick around. We'll continue the conversation in the lobby. You'll join us for future performances. You're already on our mailing list if you're here, so you'll be hearing about more in the near future. But I have to close things out with the final credits, and then maybe like one last uproarious round of applause on your part that exceeds everything you did for the actors. So we can close out our 6th and final episode of this 6-part series with a bang. So here we go. You've been listening to The Old Man from Theater of War Productions, presented by WNYC. Theater of War Productions is me, Brian Dories, and producers Marjolaine Goldsmith and Dominic DuPont and Adam Misko. Jelani Cobb wrote the story for The New Yorker. At WNYC, this was produced by Emily Botine, Ryan Wild, Katarina Barton, Jason Saul, and the entire technical team at the Greene Space. That's Chase Kulpan, Robert McGinnis, James Cronier, Eric Weber, Sean Wee, and Jamal Jones. We would like to thank the Laurie M. Tisch Illumination Fund, who made this production possible through their generous financial support. Thank you for listening. Thank you all so much. It's been an absolute honor to be with you a few days before Father's Day to have this exchange. We hope to see you at another performance in the future. Thank you for everything you gave to this radio show. It's going to air, we hope, this weekend, so listen to it on WNYC. Send it to your friends. We'll see you at the next one. Have a good night. Be safe. Bye-bye.